Hello and welcome everybody to According to Andrew number 42, Writing Prompts, Dwarves to Cyberpunk. Basically, I've been reading The Hobbit, which is a great, rereading The Hobbit, which is a great book, and I was actually lucky to get it for free from my high school because they were getting rid of it. So, um, I just, last night after I was done reading it, I just kind of had a spur of the moment idea in my head for a potential story or book or something like that. Um, And so I wrote it all down, and I had realized when I did that I had done this a couple of times now. And there's actually, even when I went and got them all together, there was more than I had thought that I had. So I wanted to share them all with you because I'm inconsistent on what I'm gonna do day to day. Besides, I've been pretty consistent about this podcast. It's been nice, but it's unlikely that I end up writing a book or whatever. But I thought if I share these ideas with them, with you guys, maybe it's enough to get somebody to go out and write something on this because I think it'd be cool. And maybe it doesn't, maybe it does, but it's there for your use. If you think it's a good start to a story or whatever, take it, run with it. Um, I think it'd be cool if somebody did that. Um, and I just wanted to start with this quote from Charles William Eliot. Books are the quietest and most constant of friends. They are the most accessible and wisest of counselors, and they are the most patient of teachers. I found that quote years ago, and I just think it's great. Um, so yeah, I have a couple different ideas, kind of ranging from a little bit more thought out to just like a one line sentence, and we're gonna go through them all. Um, and yeah, let me know what you think, or if you're gonna kind of try to do something with them. Hopefully, I do something with some of these at some point. But again, that requires effort on my part, so we'll see. So I got accompanying pictures with all of these. Um, Hold up, gotta find the right section. So okay, so this one was kind of inspired by what Gen Z and stuff like that is going through, or not Gen Z, Gen Z, the Zoomers, where like some of them are like really weird, I guess is the best way to describe it, and they're uh like suicidally, I don't, like their humor is like about suicide a lot, and it's weird. And so I thought that might make an interesting kind of basis for a potential story where like they seem to like they give off an air that they don't care about their life. So, um, what if we kind of took that and ran with it, right? So, the idea is a war story where a civil war erupts because a generation of suicidally depressed people decide that if they want to die anyway, war doesn't sound all so bad. As the fighting rages on, they form a purpose from fighting with their unit, and they gain a purpose in life. As the fighting ends, they look to rebuild. Having gone through the fire and lived, it seems death at this stage was not meant to be, and so look to start families and create a civilization again. So kind of, um, this you go from having this aloof, not really caring about about their future and stuff like that, and kind of start to generate an appreciation for that over time, and then find basically through horror kind of find purpose again and cause to build. And so from the ashes of the phoenix, uh, from the ashes rise the phoenix kind of idea. Uh, so that's pretty much all I have on that one. Next one is okay. So this is kind of inspired by like a Sword Art Online Ready Player One thing, so that's why it's on here. Yes, I like that show. I do not care if you guys think it's lame or think all that stuff. So basically, kind of the Ready Player One thing, but like not. I haven't read Ready Player One. I'm kind of going off of other people's stuff on this, but not the gamma outcome, basically. So a story where the main character is attached to the online world. After growing in this world and becoming a hero in it, he must leave it all behind to rescue the women he fell in love with through the screens. As such, our hero must once again go through the hero's journey, but in a much more uncomfortable setting, learning skills that have no use in a physical world while carrying over any cerebral skills that were picked up while gaming, pattern recognition, tactics, things like that. and struggling to interact in this new medium where he is no longer handsome and confident person he used to be. This basically it's kind of like gamma fiction, but actually basically is. But like it's one where like they have to get out of like instead of so in things like Sword Art Online and stuff like that, like their gamma personalities are seen as a good thing, and it's like, oh, and now we get to like experience the gamma male fantasy kind of thing where it's you know, you're thrust into the world that you actually want to be in instead of forcing yourself to become better in the world that you're uncomfortable in. So this is kind of the reverse of that, where it's, you know, he was comfortable in this world, he was the hero in the screens, and he's forced to leave the screens and become the hero, not in those things, and really grow as an actual person and have to deal with the fact that reality is around him and you can't just ignore it kind of thing. So basically, it's a tale for the Gamma search to become a reliable Delta and simply be happy with it. The question remains, does the friendship that was formed on the screens when they were someone else still reflect themselves when they set the game away? Interesting take. I'm not really sure what direction I would go on that. The second half could have a new love interest be introduced that the main character largely ignores because of his singular goal of saving the woman from the previous world in which he was a part of, but after saving her, she cannot let the old digital world go, and the only way they can be saved, aka won't give up the ticket, and so must leave her behind and start a family with the woman who also rejected the ticket, seeing that she was a much better fit for him all along, a la the basically the arc of the Stardust story if you've read the book or seen the movie, where he sets out on a journey because he wants to win the hand of this woman and meets another girl in the process and then finds out that like she wasn't a good match for him anyway, and so leaves her behind. So that's that story. Okay, this one, so this idea is basically this book that I have right in front of you by Brian McKellen. I haven't read it. I want to read it. So it's basically, this is the only thing I have. A story about wizards in the era of gunpowder where the power is starting to wane in the face of this new technology and how they come to grips with it. So this isn't exactly what this story is about. As far as I'm aware, it's basically set in the Napoleonic Wars, except there's magic as well as gunpowder and all that stuff, which sounds awesome. I haven't read it. I kind of want to read it now. And it's like a 3-book series or something like that. So pretty manageable in terms of book length. And I don't know how long the books are, but let me just look it up real quick. Amazon. Let's see how many pages this is. Oh, okay. So 553 pages. So they're not short, but I don't know, if they're well written, that's not really a big deal. And there's 3 of them. Let's see if they're all about similar length. Yeah, 600. And then the last one is probably going to be like another 600, if I had to guess. 600, yeah. So, all wrote, so 550, 600, 600. So, yeah, so that's that story. It sounds awesome. Haven't read it. But mine was a little kind of different. Well, I don't know, different, but basically it wouldn't be, because this is like magic and gunpowder exist, and it's like existed for a while kind of thing. Side by side, this would be like as these kind of forces are changing to where like you have the because the mages probably had magic and stuff like that, and it might have given them the upper hand in terms of combat and stuff like that during an age where swords and shields were mainly the form of combat and armor and like your classic medieval setting, or even potentially Roman times or Bronze Age times. Magic was potentially very, very powerful. But as gunpowder gets introduced, that maybe starts to wax and wane, and then you can play with a bunch of different ideas of like how magic changes the tactic and stuff like that. If you simply look at, and this might not be a good example, but if you look at Warhammer Total War, that game, it's really weird and it's very counterintuitive um, because you have magic in that game, and therefore the way that you set up your troops is radically different than you would set them up in a normal tactical sense for like a medieval time. So like normally you would have your front line, your archers behind that front line, and your cavalry on the flanks, and it would all be in a row because you don't want to be able to have soldiers sneak through, or you basically want a solid line so that you can't have holes in your line easily exploited and stuff like that. Well, that is incredibly vulnerable to magic, and so you can't do that because you would just get absolutely decimated. And so this just adds kind of like a different perspective to how tactics and stuff like that would play out on a battlefield. Now, does that read well in like a story setting? Maybe, maybe not. Um, but kind of those kind of ideas are potentially an idea for a book, and what could come out of that. So I think that would be kind of interesting. Another aspect on this story, because there's a couple different ideas I've had with the gunpowder and things like that. Because while I was watching like Harry Potter, it's always kind of weird where they're like, they have the wands and they cast the thing, and it's like there's no one that ever just like pulls out a gun and shoots somebody, right? And it's like, yeah, I have your Avada Kedavra curse too here, and it's a little metal thing in my hand, and it goes boom, right? And so just kind of, it's not more so much a story as like a scene in my head, where it's they try to the mages or whatever have like this arrogance about them, or wizards or whatever you want to call them, arrogance about them, walk around and like they're so delusional that they don't understand like they're like kind of past their prime kind of thing, and so you just have like these like witch hunters or whatever, something like that. They kind of like put them in their place, and it's like, no, like you're like second class citizens now, like get used to it kind of thing, because it's usually kind of like it's usually one or the other, but it's never kind of set as to like why that's the case sometimes, and it's usually like a come up story. Like it's never like is it a transition story most of the time? I don't know. I haven't read that much fantasy to be fair. But anyway, do with that what you will. Um, next is okay. So next is basically a magic thing that's kind of based on the idea of magic from Warhammer and 40K. So let me read the prompt, and I'll give you some extra stuff. Story about mages. They pull their power from the warp. Yes, I'm copying Warhammer's magic. A realm formed by emotion. So I thought this, like, I think that's a very interesting idea for a magic system that isn't outside of the Warhammer universe. I haven't seen explored too much. It kind of gets explored here and there. Right now I'm watching Fairy Tail, and like Natsu is just like he kind of gets his magic from emotion, where he's just like, I get more angry and therefore I get more fire. Like there's kind of that, but it's not like purely a thing that's shown. The mages are able to pull from this new realm by inciting moments of emotional instability that overthrows them and unleashes the raw energy of emotion as a force in the real world. However, these attacks only affect those who are tied to the warp, those who manifest it through their emotional highs and lows of their daily lives. There are those who are unattached from this plane of emotion and therefore cannot be harmed by its energies. They are the Stoics, those without emotion, working on pure rationality alone. Some find these people repulsive and inhuman. Others think it is the only way to prevent the warp from consuming the natural world. There are others, though, that believe in a third way. Most think that the warp is all bad, given the destructive power of the mages. This is hard to argue. However, not all energies are negative. The power of positive emotion can be just as great an effect as negative emotion, but build up a world instead. Used to build up the world instead of tear it down in fiery rage. The people are called the warlocks and seek to prevent the negative emotional warp energy from overtaking the world and bringing hope to it, and with this hope rebuild what has been lost. So basically kind of this dark light, heaven Satan kind of deal, because that's like one of the interesting things that is like the warp is just like this evil place, and especially like you have the four chaos gods in Warhammer, right? You have Khorne, which is the god of war and blood, and blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. That's Khorne. You have Tzeentch, who's the god of change. Everything's changing all the time, and there's always schemes and stuff going on. You have Slaanesh, which is lust and sex, and basically any depraved like high kind of thing. So basically BDSM type stuff. And then there is Nurgle, who is pestilence. So those are the four chaos gods. Well, there's no, in a sense, you could have a positive counterforce. Now, it's kind of set up, at least in 40k, to be the God Emperor of mankind, also known as Donald Trump. Just kidding. Well, I mean, to a certain extent. Anyway, so it's set up as like as the God Emperor of mankind to be that like shiny, but like the warp is just seen as like this evil bad thing, and there's all these demons and stuff like, but there's no like positive other side of the warp that seems to exist, which like so good emotions can't manifest themselves in other ways, and it's kind of shown through certain things throughout the 40k universe, and even maybe fantasy. I'm much more familiar with the 40k universe, like what those things are. So like you'll have saints and stuff like that that kind of manifest into reality through the hopes and will and or the hopes and goodwill of the people that are fighting for the Imperium, even though that's kind of like a dark entity, and it's the whole thing is grimdark, so like there's not really any good side, blah blah blah. Besides the orcs. Side point. So that's kind of like the idea behind it, but like there is no good emotional space, which is odd to me. And so just to kind of add that aspect and see how that balances out in the dynamics, and you're going to have a very much, I think it's going to look a lot like good versus evil, spiritual battle kind of thing. But, that's not a bad story, to be fair. All right, moving on. Next, we have this vampire one. So, one thing that's always bugged me about vampires is... Okay, so there's a couple of things I got on the vampires. So, one thing that's always bugged me about vampires, and I haven't figured out how to make a story about it yet, is the idea that these people live forever, right? And then all they do is, like, the politics and bickering and stuff like that, like, people do now. And it just seems like there's got to be a couple of them. Like, why are not all the great science... Like, okay, I understand IQs to a certain degree, but, like, okay, there's got to be a couple genius-level vampires, right? That need something to keep themselves entertained, and therefore do things like discover all of the sciences and have, like, this crazy, awesome, like, magic. Like, they should be way more advanced societally than most. Now, I realize they're a monster and that it goes against some of their archetypal things to do that, and there's their desire to live forever is some of the things that make them so short-sighted that they can't think about long-term stuff and be able to create and stuff. Like, there's maybe some archetypal reasons why you can't do it, but I still think it would be potentially interesting to have, like, them be, like, the advanced people that are controlling everything. So, and have, they discovered all the sciences. They're super wealthy. That was actually covered in, where's my book? The Iron Druid Chronicles. All the vampires are super wealthy because they can just do, like, long-term, like, return type stuff over 1,000 years, and then they just have, like, tons of money. I realize that kind of belies history, but you get it. So having aspects of that in the vampire story, I think is, I don't know, I don't want to say missing, but, like, it's a avenue that somebody could go down. Anyway, the other idea that I had was basically this. The vampires were masters of necromancy. With their powers, they could raise the dead, disturb them, and make them want for nothing. Waited on hand and foot by people of forgotten ages, the rule was never in jeopardy, for the dead have no will of their own. or so it was thought. For to animate a corpse, a portion of the soul that once inhabited it needs to be bound to it. Being the only a small portion of the soul is needed for reanimation, it was never seen as much of a threat, but this reality could not escape the people who ruled over and treated as cat. Let me read that again. Being that only a small portion of the soul is needed for reanimation, it never seemed much of a threat. But this reality could never escape the people who they ruled over and treated as cattle. For their lot in life was to live as they pleased, in life only needing to donate some blood from time to time. But what was not taken in life would be in death, and the sentence for everyone was eternal servitude to the vampires once they had perished. Most assuming their souls would move on, cared little about what happened to their bodies after death, and the rest never gave it a thought. However, the fate that was to be theirs was one worse than death, for the soul cannot pass to the afterlife unless it is whole. And so theirs was to be one of an eternity of oblivion, caught between two worlds, neither living nor dead, with the only counsel being the void that surrounded them, alone forever in swirling nothingness. Luckily, these secrets are locked away in a place where no one could find them without losing their way, the Necronomicon. For no one who is pure of heart goes looking for the Necronomicon, as reading it turns one into a vampire and loses any chance of a heavenly reward. The ones who pry for that knowledge are those of a self-serving type, those who want control and power above all else. As such, the secret was safe. So that's basically the starting prompt of a story that I had for a vampire thing. Obviously, to touch on the first idea that I had, I didn't really have a good prompt for that one. And Cyberpunk. So obviously we have Cyberpunk 2077 that just came out. Whatever your thoughts are on the game and how it got released, we're going to leave that to the side. Basically, as the hype was building for this game, I came across this really cool video on YouTube. I don't remember the name of it. And it basically was like the history of like the cyberpunk genre, and he did a really, really good job of it. And it kind of inspired me to not make I guess kind of like try to make a story of my own, or at least do something. And so I wanted to kind of set something in a world where, I'll get into it more, but basically a city, kind of like a hive city that's set up in like the 40K worlds, where everything's kind of condensed down into this one pyramid or structure, and nobody really goes in and out, kind of thing, except for maybe one minor privilege class kind of thing. So that's kind of the where I got inspired. And so let's go through it. So a cyberpunk style story where people are in a mega city and told there's nothing outside the city. Everything has been destroyed by war and nuclear fallout and the ravishings of man. The city is run by a central cabal that makes everyone in the city dependent on their technology. They are the gatekeepers of society and limit the information that can get it in and out. Anyone who is deemed to be a threat is set to be exiled, which is certain death. Except the idea that the wasteland is part of... certain death. Except the idea that there is a wasteland is part of a disinformation to control the populace. Along with that, they control the people with vice from porn, video games, especially virtual reality of both of these, to let people get lost. Monetary systems is completely online. Most people are unproductive, but they control the productive ones with titles, money, and debt, especially by getting into debt to raise your position in life, making them reaffirm the system more and more. The rest they allow to wallow in the doldrums. Drugs and other things are considered contraband to create a controlled opposition, and only works to secure their influence further. The cabal could have gotten into power via fourth generation warfare stuff, but that doesn't seem to fit the story. The key story is established that the cabal is lying to control the people, but have the main characters assume that the story about the outside world being a wasteland is all true. Have them be part of a movement that is trying to bring back gardening and green life to the city. This is a direct threat to the system, as it makes people no longer reliant on it. So I was going to have two main characters, basically a guy and a woman, and basically the woman was going to the guy was like some hacker dude, and the woman was going to be kind of interested in gardening, starting to do a garden, and he gets a hold of some information that kind of puts him on the outside. Basically, it puts him in a conspiracy group and potentially threatened to exile. So he has to bail and run around and figure out a way to be self-sufficient. And so he makes a run-in with this gardening group and figure to try to learn how to be self-sufficient, so that he can survive, basically, because he doesn't have any means. I basically made a cyberpunk version of Owen's life, but uh, sort of. um, and kind of tying in with a bunch of the other conspiracies that we've talked about and stuff like that. And basically the main idea is the phrase that Owen likes to say, which is you get kicked out of hell, right? So that's kind of supposed to be the payoff at the end of the story. They don't know it yet, but like that's the thing. So meanwhile, the man's trying to uncover the truth of the Cabal and finds gardening tied into that for some reason, thus crossing their paths. Oh, okay. So I guess that's how I set it up. Either way, one of those two things could work. And then I kind of jumped to the end of the story just to kind of flesh that out. Maybe when they're exiled, they find a thriving community of all people who escaped the beast previously and welcome them into their new homes as they are now kicked out of hell. Also shores up the concern of them dying to the elements and not having any real skills. But they would only be kicked out once they had practical skills. Oh, but you would only be kicked out once you had practical skills. The practical skills in the city are abstracts on top of abstract. Oh, the practical skills in the city are abstracts on top of abstracts. Much of the society is automated to increase dependency. No one knows how any of the systems truly work. Only some can repair the machines and keep them functioning barely. The system is starting to degrade as knowledge to make the automated machines threatens the power structure, and so society and civilization is held in a stasis as the systems that allow for the control slowly crumble. And so I did a little excerpt on two guys talking to kind of illustrate that point. Basically, you could say our main character overhears these two guys talking. The food processor is down again, the man says. Looks like it will be half rations again until they get it fixed. How long do you reckon that'll take this time, the other man said. Hard to say. Seems like each time they go down, it takes longer and longer to get going again. Last one was down for a month. But I heard that the famine of 73 was because the system broke down for half a year and the warehouse ran dry. Heard about that. It was before the Cabal took over, though. Been running a tight ship they have with plenty of stores for the bad times. I'm starting to think that the shutdowns won't go on for that long. 2 months at the most. It can't get worse than that, surely. And I think I wrote this during like the pandemic, so like this was kind of on my mind where it was like, they've constantly kicked the can down the road with like, well, now you just need to do this and this, and they just goalpost changing. So it's like this kind of embodied that to me. Yeah, you should. Yeah, I'm sure you're right. So that ends that scene, and now we're jumping to another part. So at the very end, as our protagonists are captured and they're sentenced, they're handed down their sentences, exiled for both of them. It wasn't a surprise, but it still hurt to have to acknowledge that certain death awaited them. Though knowing did bring a small sense of relief. No need to hold back the hope of a better outcome. I wonder what death would be like, he thought, as they were marched to the gates. What now, she asked him. Oh, as they were marched to the gates. I don't know why I put that first. Okay, this is why I'm not a writer. um, anyway, so this in the order. They're thrown out of the city. The gates slam behind them, and they're blinded by the light in front of them. As their eyes finally adjust to this light that the light of the sun, which they've never seen before in their life, they look around them. The beautiful green light by the beautiful green lit by the sunlight. Geez, I need to read. By the sunlight that they had never seen surrounded them and was greater than any neon explosion of colors that they could have seen in the city. What now? She asked him. He remarked, "Now we find a hill to grow on." Yes, I tried to shoehorn that in. Get angry at me if you want. uh, Jumping back, because this is not in order. This is basically just as I had ideas, I put them down, and I haven't chronologically these at all. Maybe I should have before I started this whole thing, but I didn't. So you're getting the raw stuff. Um, so gardening is banned because it uh, takes too much energy to produce the light to make the food. This is what is the official story by the people. Where food actually comes from will need to be explored. However, this is only a problem in the upside down world, as there's perfectly good sunlight outside the hive city, but if the people are allowed outside to go grow their own food, the powers that be wouldn't be able to control the population. Uh, and then this is the intro to the guy's story, is kind of how I started it. Um, so this is kind of be the start of the book, in theory. Here I am sitting alone in my dingy, smelly one-room apartment. I can barely be It can barely be called that, merely a space with enough room for a bed, computer, and bathroom. But it's cheap, and who cares? I sit at my computer, flipping through the same sites over and over again, as a wave of apathy rolls over me. There isn't even enough interest to watch porn. All the days are the same, blending together with the eternal search for novelty. Drugs, sex, and every other cornucopia of distraction have lost their luster with time, and now I sit alone, wondering what to do. All the time, all the while probably being too indifferent to do anything about my state of affairs should any inspiration stir me. Still, I will simply squash it like a bug so that I can continue to wallow in my own self-pity. I don't really have friends or even coworkers, as I do freelance coding that I pull from the message boards. It doesn't pay much, but then again, my lifestyle doesn't cost much either. Gives me more time for self-pity. As for the women, who needs them, with infinite sources of porn at one's fingertips, plus a prostitute anytime you really need one? What's the point? Then a thought stirs in me. What if I tried to hack the mainframe like I used to do when I was a kid? The rush of nostalgia overcame any apathetic feeling I might have, and I got to work. It had been years since I had done anything like this. Technically, it was illegal, but that was only if you got through, and on top of that, you had to get caught. Uh, Never was successful when I was a kid. Uh, Had a blast all the same. So I started working on the back doors, trying to find any opening that might be there. Uh, by the way, obviously not like a computer program guy. But anyway, after a couple hours, I haven't really gotten anywhere, but this has been more fun than I've had in a long time. All of a sudden, though, my code cracker pings me. It seems as though I've gotten through. A surprise to be sure, as the mainframe security system should be far more robust and taken far more time than it has thus far. I feel a bit of a rush now, as is the critical crossing point. If I crack in now, I will be considered a criminal if caught. If I leave things be, nothing will become of it. As far as the excitement seems overwhelming, and the pending sense of dread quickly overwhelms it, as being a wanted criminal is well outside my comfort zone. So I leave it be and go to bed. And then I guess the next page would be like sleeping at night, and then wake up the next morning, and it bugs me so much, and I go back and I see it's still there, and my curiosity gets the better of me, and I click on it, and then I uncover some truth, and I run with it and see what, and then that's where the story takes off. So that's the Cyberpunk story. So that's the fun one there. Take that where you will. That one's my most fleshed out one so far, kind of. And then this one, which was inspired last night while I was reading The Hobbit. Let's see here. I got this in my phone, so let me pull that up real quick. If I can find it. Okay. So I kind of envision. So you have dwarves, goblins, and dragons, and they all kind of have a similar thing. They're all greedy. They're all they want to hoard treasure and stuff like that, but they have kind of their different motivations and reasons for doing it. So this is what I have on that. Being that each of these archetype has an archetype that's complement each other. Dwarves and dragons are both known for their avarice, while goblins aren't usually money hoarders, but are cunning and tricky, like the dwarves, and can be when it comes to contracts. Dragons rely on their strength to protect their hoard. Goblins use trickery and stealing since they are small and weak by nature, while dwarves are between the two. Stronger than goblins, be weaker than dragons. I messed this up when I wrote this. Why do goblins want gold? Why do dragons want gold, for that matter? Dragons represent the insatiable greed of a person. Dwarves are hardworking people. I didn't really give a good answer for why goblins want gold. That's something that I'm going to have to figure out. But anyway, dragons represent... This is just kind of like a flow of consciousness that I had last night, and so this is what you're getting. Dragons represent insatiable greed of a person. Dwarves are hard-working people. They can create, but have a propensity to fall into that mentality of a dragon's need for more gold. So it's a battle that must be fought constantly through further creation and a purpose. Goblins are bitter gammas. They are cunning and wise, but fragile and weak. They can what they make is crude and unrefined because they don't apply themselves to their craft and feel entitled to the craftsmanship on par with the dwarves without the work. They steal gold and jewels that they could never make because they feel entitled to them. Then when these things that they can't maintain fall into disrepair, it only reinforces their bitterness towards the dwarves, claiming that their legendary claim to craftsmanship is all a lie because they themselves can't maintain what was made by the dwarves. It's a bit of a tie-in to our current collapsing society because the systems that we have in place can't be maintained by the current generation, like the goblins could never hope to maintain what they could never build. So then a kind of interesting new twist that I had thought of was have dragons be the kings, the dwarf kings. So have dragons be dwarf kings who fell to the dragon's curse, and goblins actually be gamma dwarves who are deformed because of their jealousy. So as the king falls to avarice and only cares about the hoard of his gold and not what it represents and what it can do, he falls under a curse and transforms into a dragon, and then causes the collapse of his entire kingdom. And kicks all the dwarves out basically, and guards and hoards over his treasure, and then it's maybe served by the gamma dwarves, also known as goblins, as they want to hoard, and basically it's a chance for them to take what the dwarves have, working under the dragon. So needs some work, but yeah. Also, the dragon's curse is seen as inevitable. The king is prosperous for a while, and then greed takes over the heart of the king, turning him into a dragon and destroying the kingdom in the process. But the king is slain by the lineage down the line, and the treasure is reclaimed, and the prosperity of the dwarves rises again until such a time that the dragon's curse takes the next one eventually. Then one of the dwarves wishes to break the cycle of greatness and then decline. And this kind of got inspired from the cycle, the Chinese cycle, as they say, of the kingdom long divided must unite, and the kingdom long united must divide. So trying to break that cycle, basically. Or the other thing is wooden clogs going up the stairs, silken slippers going down. So you're trying to find a way to prevent this. Then one dwarf wishes to break the cycle of greatness and then decline. He finds not to fall for the curse, one must destroy the treasure of the dragon. For those that look to take the treasure back for themselves are already dragons in spirit, if not form as of yet. Ultimately, the son is successful in destroying the treasure. He hopes that will also turn his father back to normal, but the only thing the dragon knows or lives for is the treasure, and even if they don't know why. So this is the idea of you can't force someone to not take the ticket. You have to basically they have to come to it of their own free will. Think of the what is the term? It's a story in the Bible of the two brothers, and the one takes his inheritance and runs off and squanders it, and then eventually he comes back and is like, "I'm sorry, Father, forgive me." Um, and it's like you have to go through that journey to come to that conclusion. And so, because the dragon, his father, hadn't done that, he can't reverse the curse, and he must die, basically. Only if they chose to give it up as our protagonist did, can one break the dragon's curse. Now from the heat, the dwarves can either, oh, now from then on, the dwarves can either learn and live more simple lifestyles, to prevent the avarice from ever building to a fever pitch and causing the dragon's curse, or the lessons that have been learned and the tales will be passed to generation on how one must be willing to give up the treasure, otherwise one loses oneself. So this is kind of like a split into like how you want to deal with it. So you can have the idea of the dwarves, instead of hoarding treasure, they use it, they invest it, they do things with it. They don't just pile it in piles, and that can be the lesson that they learn. Or you can have the lesson be kind of like um, the lesson of Abraham or the rich man, where so Jesus said it's easier for a camel to fit through an eye of the needle than a rich man to get into heaven, and that's the idea of you have to you can have wealth, but you have to be able to willing to throw it all away and burn it all, and get rid of it all, and not even blink and think about it, um, and that will that allows that willingness to be able to do that means that you can have that and handle it better. Um, so you could have something like that uh, kind of just be a tradition that's passed down, and this could be done via a ceremony that's done every year, where at the end of the year they destroy all the treasure that they have, or each person has to give up a valuable piece of thing that they hold dear that is just a inanimate object, something that doesn't really have value. Now the issue I have with that is um, that could tie into burning our history kind of thing. So that's where I have kind of a conflicting idea on going that direction. Um, uh, and then so but something to that tune basically is the idea as I had. And then one last little thought is the goblins could serve the dragon as the dwarves who had lost their humanity, so to speak. And since none of them could create, it's a cycle where the goblins try and fail to create for the dragon more treasures for him to hoard over, and see the dwarves uh, ruins as they slowly fall into disrepair, since they cannot create with their own hearts are full of avarice. Also, they want to be the dragon, but cannot be, and so must content themselves with the fact that the dragon has destroyed what the dwarves had, and this helps satisfy the eternal hatred of the dwarves, if but slightly. It's that constant like uh, have to get back at the person who wronged me, gamma male thing that they all have. Um, so those are all the prompts, I believe. Uh, so let me know what you guys think of them. Hopefully you can use one of them, and hopefully I use one of them at some point and start going on it. Because I think some of them have potential. Anyway, uh, so just to kind of end where we started, books are the quietest and most constant of friends. They are the most accessible and wisest of counselors, and the most patient of teachers. Charles William Eliot. Um, and with that, I would like to conclude. This has been According to Andrew, with my various writing prompts that I've come up with. Thank you guys all for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe if you thought this was useful or something that you're interested in. I'm on BitChute, YouTube, and Podbean, and I appreciate any comments or any thing that you guys would like to share. And have a good day.